Hello everyone, welcome to the video of today. This is Beyond the Truth. Today we're going to be talking about the Selk'nam people. Due to its geographical location, right in Ona's Sin land, Tierra del Fuego, the Selk'nam people's contact with the white man was marked by the forced transit of explorers and traders. Newcomers hunted local fauna to the point of extinction, species on which the Ona people depended on for sustenance. In the late 1800s, the colonization of the southern tip by the Argentina and Chile republics, as well as the British, for its strategic relevance in navigation, the British Empire preserved territorial portions in the region, contributed to what is known as the Selk'nam Genocide. The survivors were stripped of everything, including their children, who were forcibly taken away and taken to the mainland on both sides of the border of the newly formed republics. Officially, it was simpler for the democratic governments to declare the Selk'nam people extinct. At the end of the 19th century, the Selk'nam, Onas, and the Haush, the hunting-gathering people who inhabited the Isla Grande, Tierra del Fuego, Argentina and Chile, were decimated by the whites, either killed outright, died of diseases brought, though unintentionally, by the whites. Of a population that Kusinde, 1982, E. 135 calculated as comprising from 3,500 to 4,000 individuals. There exists today on the Isla Grande very few descendants of the Selk'nam. The Selk'nam and Haush of the Isla Grande occupy a privileged place in the anthropological literature partly because, as far as known, they had an uninterrupted past as hunter-gatherers going back thousands of years, ever since they arrived there from the north. Isolated on the island, through the centuries they had very little, if any, contact with Indian farmers further north. Therefore, their cultures up until about 1880 were pristine, virtually unaffected by contact with cultivators. In contrast, many of the other hunter-gatherers, tribes, and communities in Paraguay, Brazil, and Bolivia had been, or still are, part-time cultivators. They were forced out of their territory as a result of European conquest or by more aggressive Indian neighbors, and had taken refuge in areas which were unfit for intensive cultivation, and therefore they had to depend principally or exclusively on hunting and gathering to survive. The Patagonians, Tehuelches, were traditional hunters, like the Selk'nam, but by the late 17th century, the Mapuches, Araucanians, acquired horses from the Spaniards and tamed wild horses. Once they could ride horseback, they invaded and colonized a great part of Patagonia, settled there, and intermarried with the Tehuelches. The horses and the Mapuches, who were cultivators and part-time hunter-gatherers, radically transformed the Tehuelche traditional way of life. The Selk'nam had only sporadic contact with the whites until about 1880, when the colonization of their island began. Therefore, the memory and even the experiences of those who survived the colonization reverted back to the period when their culture was still intact. By the late 19th century, there were far less Haush than Selk'nam, though an unknown number had been killed or poisoned by sealers and succumbed to diseases during the course of the 19th century. This may not explain the great difference in population. Apparently, the Haush were a peaceful people, and they may have lost a considerable portion of their population before the Europeans arrived, during conflict with the more aggressive Selk'nam, who had pushed them into the southeastern section of the island. They were living there in 1690 when they were first visited by Europeans, the Nodal brothers, in good Success Bay, along the Strait of the Le Maire, in two caravels sent by the King of Spain to explore the new route to the Pacific via Cape Horn, recently discovered by the Dutch 3 years previously. Still another factor distinguishes the Selk'nam and the Haush from other hunting-gathering groups of Brazil and nearby countries. Their habitat, though situated in the extreme southern regions of the hemisphere, was not a marginal area of poor resources. Rather to the contrary, it was favorable for this type of economy, but not for agriculture. Hunters and gatherers had survived on the island some 11,000 years. The archaeologists have insisted the area south of the Magellan Strait which includes the Isla Grande, was not a refuge area in the sense that the climate was not overbearing and fauna was adequate for this type of subsistence, nor did the environment curtail or limit the cultural expressions of its inhabitants. The economy and social organization of the Selk'nam and that of the Haush were similar, at least during the last period, so for the purpose of this article, they are treated as one society. For the reasons cited above, this society affords insight into the hunting-gathering mode of life in its plenitude, fertilized, so to speak, by many thousands years of experience, until it was destroyed at the end of the 19th century. The Selk'nam and the Haush were semi-nomads in a sense that the local groups, lineages or extended families, of which there were approximately 80 in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, moved from one campsite to another within the limits of their respective territories, called Haruin. They were not navigators. They did not have any type of seacraft. This raises the question of how they crossed the Strait of Magellan, which is 4 kilometers wide in its narrowest part. Were they simply given a ride by the Alakaluf Indians who were navigators? Did they fabricate rafts from tree trunks, crowding their families on top with dogs and all? It is not yet known just how or when the Selk'nam arrived on the Isla Grande. Other hunters who disappeared, became extinct, or were assimilated by the newcomers, had probably inhabited the island thousands of years before. The Isla Grande, divided between Argentina and Chile since 1981, though it was claimed before, is situated between the approximate latitudes of 52 and 55 south of its entire area of approximately 48,000 square kilometers. About 38,000 square kilometers was occupied by the Indians, at least during the 19th century. The remaining 10,000 square kilometers correspond to the Darwin Cordillera on the southwestern rim of the island. In the city of Ushuaia, on Beagle Channel, the winter temperatures vary from 12 to 27 centigrade below zero, while the summer average is 10 above zero. In the steppe or prairie land of the northern part of the island, facing the Atlantic Ocean and the Strait of Magellan, the temperatures vary between 20 below zero in the winter to 27 above zero in the summer. Along this northern coast, the winter temperature tends to be almost 2 degrees warmer than along the southeastern coast, mainly Beagle Channel. The summer days, December to March, are notably long, with a maximum of light from 4 a.m. to past midnight. Summer is the season of the strongest Antarctic winds, and sometimes it snows during the summer in the southern parts of the island. In the winter, June to September, it is light during shortest days only from about 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The short day light is compensated for by calmer winds and transparent clarity. Gathering. Women, often accompanied by children, were in charge of systematic gathering of almost all the objects necessary for domestic consumption. They collected edibles, as mentioned above, water, and often the firewood. The tools required for such tasks were a pointed stick or a knife, a basket, a bag, and straps or cords to transport the objects back to their dwellings. However, there appeared to have been a certain reluctance on the part of the men to take over the women's tasks. If an Indian happened upon a nest containing eggs, he might pick them up, but more likely he would point out the nest to his wife or daughter, who would then go there. But the men did gather other materials besides firewood, such the appropriate woods and the minerals, stones, for the manufacture of tools, to lit a fire, flint and pyrite, and tree trunks used in the construction of the wigwam-type dwelling and the ceremonial hut, which required the use of a stone axe or fire. The social aspect is also outstanding. The women seldom worked alone. Usually 2 or more women cooperated during identical tasks, while the men were more solitary workers, and when they did cooperate, the individuals were often assigned different tasks to achieve an agreed-upon objective, as when they hunted guanacos and cormorants. Fishing. It was performed in the same way as the hunting and gathering. The less specialized work was assigned to the women. They usually fished along the coast with a small lance or picked up recently dead fish at low tide, activity which was often combined with collecting shellfish. If, for example, the male provider had no adult sons or near male kin, became ill or was deceased, the wife or widow and older daughters turned to fishing as a substitute for guanaco meat to consume with the foods gathered. As a division of labor was not a law, the men gathered fish or used a lance, but their specialty involved rather large nets or building small dikes, usually at the mouth of a river. While one or more would manipulate or steady the net or take care of the dike held together, others would kill the fish. The loss of these mesmerizing tribes is arguably one of the most tragic parts of Latin American history. Any attempts at preserving their languages and culture should be applauded and encouraged. Tell us what you guys think, and we'll see you next time.